Tessa. So this was really a technical kind of briefing that sort of outlines which institutions will be opened and processes around applications for social relief. But it comes within a context, doesn't it? It comes within a context, I would say, where we are seeing an increase in the debate around whether or not this lockdown is sustainable vis-à-vis the economic impact and the need to sustain even more and more people on the social safety net.
Yeah, I think that in terms of the lockdown debate, government was forward-thinking in its decision to make this grant, especially the special COVID grant, a 6-month grant. And I don't think this is because we have in mind that we're going to be in lockdown, especially in harder forms of lockdown for 6 months, but because there's a recognition that even when we start to ease up lockdown, our economy has been affected. And that means that people who were vulnerable before, and we know that we had at least 10 million people who were unemployed before all of this happened. And we also then add to that layers of informal workers who may be affected by this, flexible laborers who may be affected by this. And so I think even if we ended lockdown today, there would still be a level of vulnerability that is exposing people to higher levels of hunger, higher levels of poverty that would need to be seen to as part of what the president's calling the recovery phase. And so I think there was foresight in extending the idea of what the social protection will cover, at least until October. And I suspect that given what the recovery may or may not look like, because we don't really know how well the economy will recover, and even if it recovers to its previous state, it wasn't glorious then, we may really need to think about different ways of extending it even further. But I think there was foresight in thinking about that, but I don't think these measures mean that there's going to be an indefinite lockdown.
Is the political dynamic shifting somewhat, in your view, Tessa, in that, I mean, in the early days of this crisis, there was sort of a deferring to the leadership of President Cyril Ramaphosa and the cabinet, even by political parties, opposition political parties. But in the last few days, I mean, if you look at issues such as the whole issue around the cigarette ban and also the alcohol ban and whether or not this lockdown is sustainable or not, one gets the sense that people are sort of going back to their entrenched political positions.
Absolutely. I do think we're seeing the dynamics shifting. And as politicians do, the dynamics are shifting based on some of their own interests, some lobby interests, but also some public popular interests. And I think that the president does have a lot of power in this situation as somebody who has shown the ability to manage some of the political party tensions at the beginning of this lockdown, to take hold of the situation again and find new ways to find consensus. I do think that the criticism by the DA is a fair one around long lags in hearing from the president. And this is something a lot of people have been saying, even when the president was speaking, is that we weren't hearing enough from the president in terms of him answering questions, giving more accountability. I do think his role is central as the person who has shown at the beginning of this lockdown to be able to rally people around himself. And I think that is necessary now. I think we saw today that he put out another one of his Monday letters, which is starting to speak about the easing down of the lockdown in the future. And I think that kind of thing would need actually a more public verbal communication around these kinds of issues, because people are starting to feel like this lockdown will be indefinite. There's no vision about the way forward. We're seeing drips and drabs from Dr. Karim here, from the Minister of Health there, but we have not heard a coordinated vision for how we ease lockdown, and that's starting to make people very anxious.
I'm eager to hear your assessment of opposition in a time of crisis, because we know that crises of this nature, where the very life of the nation is sort of under threat, do tend to have a good sort of impact on the popularity of the incumbent. I mean, you know, history is replete with those examples. It seems to me that the DA has decided to up the ante. The EFF, on the other hand, has been playing it rather interestingly. We had a period of time when the EFF went quiet and basically pledged their support for the lockdown and the response, and you didn't hear from them that often. They would raise a point about one or two issues, but not really wanting to try and carve out any kind of space outside of what the response has been from government. What's your sense? Which strategy serves these parties better? Do we even care about that at this point?
I personally don't care about what strategy serves the DA or the EFF better. I do care about what the result is in terms of people's ability to have credibility in our leadership. And while opposition parties are definitely needed in a time like this to hold governments to account, there are mechanisms to do so that I don't feel are being used effectively, particularly by the DA. Parliament is a key structure in this regard and has the ability to call ministers to order, to ask for accountability. The second layer of that is the judiciary. And I think that going straight, bypassing Parliament and the judiciary, to go straight for the poll of public opinion first, is a way that you start to create a divisiveness in our politics. I think the EFF have not been silent. The EFF have just decided that their public platforms will be to speak as a unified front through their press releases that they give, and where they have opposition, they show it, and when they don't have opposition, they stay quiet. Whether those positions are right or wrong is neither here nor there, but I know the EFF realize that they have the power to rile up a society in the same ways that the DA has the power to rile up parts of society. And I think they're choosing restraint. And I don't think that the DA needs to be silent, but I certainly think they need to be consistent. And I think there's been some signs of inconsistency in some of their messages. But secondly, I think that using more and more of the structured processes makes it look less like it's politicking and more like it is governance and accountability, which is their role as the leader of the opposition in Parliament.
All right, thank you for your insights there. That's Tessa Dooms. She's been watching that briefing by the Social Development Minister and the team.